All right, so I'm going to stand up and explain this slide. And it's sort of before we begin today. I want to explain some things for people who are, well, anyway. So Baba said that we're coming to a time of a transition from reason to intuition. So what do we need intuition for? So the point of this history that we're going through, and next week will be the last part of that history. The point of it is to show why we need something to change. We need a new kind of thinking. There's something wrong in our thinking. Here's a quote by Baba. It's from Beams. Through the ages, the human mind has been profoundly restless in its search for final explanations about first things. These endeavors to grasp first things through the intellect is a tale of inspiring failures. Okay? So we're looking at those inspiring failures. That's what we've been doing. Okay? And the reason we're doing that is because to talk about a problem, you have to see the problem. And it's just, otherwise it's gibberish. So, we will go fast today. At home, people can stop the video and eventually they'll be able to read the book and use these, or maybe I'll redo these someday. Now, if nothing else, if there's something you can't follow, just try to see the humor in these earlier attempts to explain even basic things like how do we experience the world. This is a question that the people are not able to answer. So we're going to look at it, but we're not laughing at them, but we're trying to see, well, these are the best minds doing the best job. And I'm trying to show you that it doesn't work. So, for we must see how the intellect has failed us before we can see why it needs to be fixed. Okay, so soon we're going to go back, when we're done, after next week. We're going to look back on this and we're going to see the problem. And I'm going to show you what the problem was. All right, so don't worry if today's talk is hard to follow. These are some of the hardest concepts that there are, that anybody's ever had. And philosophy is considered second to physics in difficulty, academically. So don't worry if, okay, so I said that. And some of these ideas, especially one of them I'm going to come to, don't make sense, okay? So it's not because, the problem is not because, well, Chris is must be doing a terrible job explaining this because I'm not getting it. That's not what it is. I'm doing a fine job explaining it, okay? It's good, better than my teachers, okay? And it's not because you're dumb, okay? That's not the problem either. You're not dumb. You're smart people. The problem is that what I'm explaining doesn't make sense. So it creates a kind of cognitive dissonance. Like, what? Well, and then you can actually even shut down. You go, I'm either too stupid or the teacher's too stupid. There's something wrong. I don't know, and you can't get past it. Okay, so I'm telling you up front. And I'll point to it. And I go, what I just said doesn't make sense. Okay? It's not you. Now, what's interesting about this, we'll see. Let me skip that. I'll say it in a moment. Now, it's been criticized that I say, got it? Okay. I thought about it and I watched the videos. At the beginning, I actually was kind of like, do you understand, like begging for affirmation? But after a while, I couldn't stop just saying got it. And I realized I just say got it and it just means point made, moving on. So when I reach the end of a point, I make a little asterisk and I go, got it. And then I just move to the next thing. So you don't have to actually ask yourself in your head, did I get it? Should I answer Chris? Is he asking me if I got it? Because I'm not sure I got it. No, it's just me. And in my book, on such points, I actually put an asterisk. Okay, so I say that at the beginning. When you see an asterisk, it's covered a point that has to be understood before you move on. Okay. Now, our talk today is called Baba and the Future, Part 5. The idealism, something we'll understand in a few minutes. And this is the Enlightenment period reactions to the problem of that Descartes brought to the attention of the world that we talked about last week. Okay? And anybody can go back. Oh, God. I'm going. Okay, I'm a little bit. Okay, I have a little clock here that goes, get to the next point. Okay. So, we're talking about the Enlightenment. Remember them? These are the smartest people, supposedly, in the world, at that time, okay? We can't know that, and it's actually literally called the Age of Reason. So if we're talking about transition from reason to intuition, this is a good time to be looking at. We're going to look at the best efforts of these incredibly smart people who gave us the American Constitution and our economic system and sort of modern democracy and a lot of great things. Okay. Now last week I explained that Descartes who was at the beginning of the Enlightenment, he had come up with this thought experiment about an evil demon. Now, that was fooling him. Now I explained that this actually was important because, see, by this time, the view, which I explained last week, was called corpuscularism, since Galileo and Robert Boyle after Galileo. And Descartes was familiar with corpuscularism. It's still the scientific view. I'll just repeat. So you got these little atoms and they're outside your head. Okay, they're corpuscles, okay? Or little particles, okay? And those go float in your nose and they kind of tickle or wiggle those little nodes in your nose, and then this signal goes to something, and then there's something firing away, and then suddenly you have smell. Okay, so the idea is there is no smell out there. There's atoms. Okay, that's the view of the time. Because of that, we don't see the world directly. It's like in the movie The Matrix. You're not seeing the world directly. Because of that, that's why he had this, I thought, to consider the possibility that it could be an illusion. Somebody could be fooling me because I'm not seeing things directly, so how do I even know there is an external world? Okay, got it? Okay, so we're moving on. So, then I said that this was a big deal. Everybody read Descartes. He wrote in Latin, and everybody could read Latin, and it went all over Europe. Everybody, the Germans were reading it, the English were reading it, the French, okay, he was French. So, and I said it was like the eye of Sauron in Lord of the Rings. It's like, oh my God, they saw it. They saw the problem. Now this problem had always been there. It had always been there, but it had not been noticed. As I said earlier, Aristotle had sort of glibbed over it. He had a very clever way to explain why, while we can't see the world directly, we don't see the matter, we know it's what's called veridical, true of the external world. But Aristotle fell apart with Galileo, if you remember from 2 talks ago. We're way past Aristotle now. They're seeing big, they're in a crisis. Because everything was smooth when they had Aristotle, because all you had to do was say, well, Aristotle said so. Oh, okay, it's okay, everybody's feeling good. Now they don't even know if there's a world. Okay, there were 4 responses to Descartes in the Enlightenment. These are their names, this is where they lived. And I'm going to draw on the board 2 possibilities for solving Descartes' Cartesian problem. Cartesian after Descartes, René Descartes. And it goes like this. So, by this time, I have said for a long time, even since Plato, we had a 2-world view. There was reality, which we couldn't really see, even in Plato. And then there was our sense perception, okay? And our thoughts, and they're internal, okay? Well, this continued in many forms and continues right up to this moment, okay? So, you have a 2-world view. But because of Descartes came up with this idea that there were actually 2 substances. Each world has its own kind of substance. That means it's stuff. And over in the world of our thought and our experience, which includes our sense perception, like color and sound, and our thoughts, and our desires, and pain, all that's kind of like, we're going to draw a little tree here, okay? All of that, and God, he's in here too, and your soul or your mind, and they're called literally mind substance. Mind is a stuff, okay? All that is over here in our head. Now this is the idea, and then this is called, we're going to call this mind, or they also called it spirit, okay? And then over here, we have the theoretical real tree, and it's out there and it's made of matter, see? It's the real material tree, but we can't see it. We only have a representation of it when we look I mean, literally, when I'm looking at you, I'm not looking at, according to this, I don't see Anne, I see my representation. Because Anne can't get in my head, because there's no holes big enough. You could shrink her down and then, okay, so, and now, this is we call body. Today we would say matter, but in those days they said body. It meant the same thing. Bodies, like I said, a celestial body, foreign bodies. But they didn't mean bodies like horses and us. They meant body. Now, so this is mind, matter, okay? And so this is the mind-body problem. And this was called, not by him, but by Descartes, by others after Descartes. They described his idea of these two substances as substance dualism. Now the problem, as I explained last week, is that they go, well, if these are two substances, and this one doesn't even, this one is not even have spatial characteristics. It's not even located anywhere, because it's not that kind of thing. See, physical things are located somewhere, like that projector. But your dream, where is it? At least as they understand it. They weren't thinking quite like us, okay? It doesn't have location. So how can something that has, it's like cast with a ghost, it'll just float through physical things, okay? How does it have a connection? How can, for instance, my mind control my body? Because it can't push on it or pull on it because it's not physical, okay? And then the other way is, how can I be getting an experience? Oh no, how can I be picking up on what's going on in that other world since I can't see it directly? And that's the interaction the other way. So there's a mind-body interaction problem. That's the Cartesian mind-body problem. Now, as I said, everybody saw this. And everybody saw this. And they thought, okay, this is a real problem. There were two possible ways of solving this problem, okay? The problem was that it was a dualism, okay, of two incompatible substances. There's no way that they can be compatible. They can't interact with each other. It just didn't seem to work. So there were two experiments through history, from this point to the moment we live in. And the first one was to go, well, first of all, they had to get rid of the dualism. It had to be a monism, okay? We got to get rid of these two things. There's just got to be one thing, because it seems like that, and I don't feel like, okay, so one possibility was to get rid of the body G. Get rid of that side. Everything is mental. Everything's in your head, okay? It's all ideas in your mind. And this whole thing was a dumb idea, okay, that somebody made up, okay? Well, we're going to get rid of it. We're going to try and make everything make a sense as just mental and there's no physical world, okay? And that's called, because these are called ideas in the mind, it's called idealism. But it doesn't mean idealistic, like in this normal sense. It means ideaism. It was named out by the Germans that were ridiculing the ones that started to experiment with this, although they eventually caught the bug. Okay, when I say matter is a theoretical entity, at this point in these talks, I know that Judy Mangold knows what I mean, because she's really fond of listening. I think you do. Okay, this was said, I didn't make it up. The one who taught me that and used those words is Chris Hill, who has a PhD from Harvard. He's at Brown University, and I was lucky enough to have him as my philosophy of mind teacher, and epistemology teacher, and logic teacher. So this is an uncontroversial fact. Now, nobody would be able to understand that had they not been following this course. Even if some people still might go, what does that mean? But if you follow this course, that should be, I get it. Okay, so I'm pointing out that we're already getting to the point where we're able to follow really sophisticated ideas because we've been going through this journey. We couldn't have. I was trying to talk to a person who's very erudite, has a master's degree in English, and he was trying to talk to me about philosophy, and I said, well, matter is a theoretical entity. And he said, what? I mean, he was totally confused. And this is a very intelligent person. So he needed he didn't understand. Okay, he didn't understand. Now see, there's two senses of the word matter. That's why I have the word matter, had the word matter up there. There are two senses of the word matter. The first one is the colloquial, normal sense we ordinary people use. For regular, healthy, good people, we mean, like in Madonna's I'm a Material Girl. We mean stuff. We mean the physical stuff. Physical stuff like this apple, okay? It's material. I'm looking at it. I'm feeling it with my hand. I'm feeling the matter. I'm looking at the matter. It's definite. But in philosophy, and there's nothing unrespectable. That's a real meaning of the word material, okay? But in philosophy, that's not what the word matter means. In philosophy, we're not experiencing it directly. So, I need to cover that. All right. Okay. Now, we're at John Locke, and I looked at my time. I was supposed to be here 10 minutes ago. Okay, let's tear it out. Okay, he was an English philosopher. He was very respected in his time. He was an empiricist. I need to explain what an empiricist is. An empiricist is a person who believes you're born a blank slate when you're a baby, and you don't have any innate ideas or at all. Okay, you're just a blank slate. And that what happens is you then you have sense perception of the world, and then gradually through sense perception you start realizing, that 2 and 2 is 4 and stuff, because you put together 2 popsicle sticks and you saw it, and that's how the mind works. And it builds up from simple ideas to complex ideas, but it's all ideas, it's all, okay. And he was a follower of corpuscularism, which we've already covered, and he was also familiar with Descartes' meditations. And it's funny that Baba said on first things, trying to explain first things, because Descartes' meditations is actually called Meditations on First Principles. So it really goes with Bob. So then he didn't really invent anything metaphysically in philosophy. He was more interested in economics and politics and things, and he was very good, and highly respected. He was one of the more educated of the philosophers, and he wrote this book in which he's covering everything that the science of the day is kind of a populist, like for people who want to know what's happening, And so he's systematizing what people think at the time. And I explained corpuscularism last week, and he's describing corpuscularism, thing about the nose and the atoms are, you don't really see them, but you have these sensations. So now, this is the hardest slide of all these talks. I'll never have a slide this hard. Please get a good shot of this slide so people can freeze it and read it. I don't really have time to go over it, but I'm going to, instead of reading it, I am going to try. God, this is the one that I was most afraid of. Okay, this is an apple for people from outside the country coming here for the first time. Okay. And now this apple has qualities. Okay, that means properties or attributes, but in the time, this period, he's writing in English. These are called qualities. Okay, and one of the qualities is red. Okay, now red, remember, is in your head. I already explained. Outside, there's atoms, and they wiggle, whatever. And it has a smell. Remember that one's in your head. So they also call these qualities ideas because they're in your head. Because what else is in a head? Ideas. Today we use the word ideas more strictly for thoughts. Then it meant qualities that you perceive. They were ideas. Ideas in the mind. okay? And they were qualities. Now, the idea that he explained is that some of the qualities, this came from Galileo, and he's just repeating Galileo and Robert Boyle, who came before him. He's just formalizing for the educated English public where what we believe, what we now know, okay? And some of these qualities are in your head, but some of these qualities that you perceive are also out there in the invisible external world. Now, that doesn't actually make any sense, because don't you find them in your experience? How are the qualities of this apple that I'm experiencing, in my experience, they're outside? So the question was, well how does that work? So the quality that would be on the outside, qualities that were on the inside were a little different for everybody that looked at. Everybody smells something, kind of smells it a little different. Color, sound can be different. If an object's moving, I won't get into the technicalities. So the problem was, the quality that was on the outside is a real good example is math, the numbers. So this is one apple, and it has a height of 2.9 to 3.7. Okay, so you put a dot of a dot, those numbers, that's a ratio. And it's got geometry, which can be written in geometric form, okay? And these qualities that were quantifiable, they were the same for everybody. So the assumption was, well, they must be really out there in the invisible external world. Now the question was, well how are numbers out there? Like, what are they doing? Don't they need to sit on something? I mean, they need some kind of a substratum or something. So he said substratum. So he's the one who invented the idea. And this is basically, he's trying to explain matter. So he says, you got a number and it's like 3 by 4. It's a quality of my apple. Okay. Now, how is this outside my head? Isn't that an idea? If there was ever an idea, it was that. I mean, everybody agrees math is abstract and is mental. But it's got to be out there. So he decided that for it to be out there, it had to have some kind of support. So he came up with the idea of substratum. Now, substratum, he didn't mean that in some other meanings, very fancy. He's literally talking about, this building right now is sitting on the substratum of a cement slab. That's a substratum. That's what he meant. There's some kind of slab. Okay, so the substratum is like, I'm exaggerating, but there's a substratum, and then this can sit and it gives it support. This is out in the real world. Okay? Now this was the idea that I wanted you to go. If you're puzzling right now, then you're following what I'm saying, because this doesn't make any sense. Okay? All right. Now, people at the time, they weren't dumb, and a lot of them noticed that didn't make any sense. Okay? That's the material world, that's how it works. So they started really thinking, this is where we get idealism, okay? We get this guy, these two guys, and they're Berkeley and Hume. George Berkeley we get the name Berkeley, California. And the other one is David Hume, who lived after him. He was born about the time that Berkeley published his major work. They come right behind each other. They are going to question this silly external world, okay? Now, as I said, Berkeley is the most famous idealist in the world. He's the first idealist. We're going to talk about him in a minute. Berkeley died never having heard the word idealist. So, kind of interesting point. They call it philosophical idealism. He never heard of that. It was come up with after he died in Germany, ridiculing these guys. And any German that thought like that. They was an idealist. They're an idealist. But gradually, it changed. Now, I want to talk about Berkeley because I did my thesis on Berkeley, and he's my favorite philosopher. And he's imperfect, and he has just as many problems as everybody else. But I like him. He was a really nice guy, and I just really like everything about him. His house, he lived in Ireland, but he traveled broadly. He knew other philosophers of the time, and he was a bishop. But he wrote when he was in college. Well, his books, his greatest books, he did all his writing when he was about 26. He was like a prodigy, and he went to Trinity College in Dublin, and he became the Bishop of Cloyne, and he's mentioned as a savant in the Gospel of Ramakrishna by Swami Nikalananda. I'm not a hippie, so I don't know that stuff. And the reason he's named, Berkeley is named for him because of a line in a poem by him that is on the board, and I'm not going to read it. He lived for a while in Newport, Rhode Island. His house is still there, and it's a museum. And one day I'd love to go because I really like him. Oh, that's on the right. They have I don't know what to call it. He's not buried there. It's an effigy of him in Coleman's Cathedral in Ireland. So people actually go on pilgrimage. And he is a saint of the Anglican Church, which is the Church of England. He's considered a saint. Now, well, if I have to, I'll unhook this. Matter, inconceivable. He goes, what are you talking about? This is inconceivable. I mean, he just noticed what's the obvious. He says, I have no reason to believe in the existence of matter, since I cannot assign any use to it, or explain anything by it, or even conceive what is meant by it. George Berkeley. That's why he's mentioned in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, because it's very Eastern, okay? But he's very Western. He doesn't think like an Easterner, but it still would bring this kind of thinking to the West. Now, Berkeley was right that matter, as it is conceived in philosophy, not by Madonna, is unprovable, okay? We simply have no way to compare our inner and outer in order to, see if it's like this theoretical stuff. Remember, matter is theoretical stuff in philosophy. But Berkeley goes further and says, we cannot even conceive of this external world, for any such mental picture would, by its very nature, be simply another private personal experience. Addressing the notion some people had at the time that they were picturing and could conceive of the physical world. By the way, this is how they did so. They'd be looking, with their eyes, and they have in their head a tree. Well, let's put the tree in here. So, and they would just go, well, I can picture it. It looks like this. So, do you see the projection? They have their experience, and they just, I know what it looks like. The real tree, the physical tree, looks like that. But see, they were naive realists. Okay? So he says, he points out something, one of the most brilliant things I think I've ever heard. A single thing, and he's very notorious for this. He's both famous and notorious. It still pisses people off, but they can't find any flaw in the reasoning. Here's what he said. But do you not yourself perceive or think, okay, when he's talking about people who are picturing the outside world, but do you not yourself perceive or think of them all the while? This only shows you have the power of imagining or forming ideas in your mind, but it does not show the objects of your thought may exist without your mind. For when we do our utmost to conceive the existence of external bodies, we are all the while only contemplating our ideas. That's the negative part of Berkeley's idea. We're supposed to be on Hume and we're not. The negative part is that this doesn't make any sense. That's the negative part. The positive part is he has to propose an alternative to Locke and Galileo and Robert Boyle and all the thinkers that have come before him. He has to propose an alternative. So he comes up with what we have represented up here. This is, I give a line by St. Augustine that gives him some support in this idea that everything is ideas in the mind of God. Okay. And there's your head. There's your head. Your mind. This is actually an immaterial mind. Yeah. There's God's immaterial mind. So there is God's substance. We just got rid of the material substance. He just got rid of one side of that Cartesian dualism. He kept one, basically like Descartes described. The whole world is in God's mind because he dreamed it up. It's his idea. And then he goes, and he's thinking it all the while. That's how it's being sustained in God's mind. But he goes, well, think about it. God's the greatest mind. I mean, he's not going to do anything stupid or unnecessary. He's going to do everything in the most parsimonious way he can. Why would he go and build after he has the idea of the world and can see the world in his mind? Why would he then go and build this other one that's a material one that serves no purpose and is really confusing? It was seen in the Cartesian interaction problem. It can't really do anything. Nobody can see it. Like, what's it for? Why did God do that? It's a good point. Okay. So, there's problems in Berkeley. Oh, I have to say something about this. I gotta go back, because before this makes sense. Okay, so how did the ideas get from God's mind into our mind? Well, God implants some of them, copies of, in your mind. And he just plants just the right ones that are right for you at any particular moment, because he only needs for you to see and experience the part of his world that he has in his head, enough for you to be a good Christian and go to church, and that's all. Anything else would be superfluous. And God has to kind of continuously do this, except that he also has ideas for laws. So some things, laws of nature. So some of this stuff could kind of go along by itself, but God is doing everything. Okay, and he's putting ideas in our minds. He's implanting them. Okay, now we'll go to the problem. And it's important to see the problems. The negative part is unimpeachable. No person has ever been able to dispute Berkeley's refutation of matter. As a matter of fact, Bertrand Russell wrote in his autobiography, he said, I can't see any way to dispute it, but I just find it temperamentally repulsive. Okay, people just hated it, but they could. To this day, there is no argument against Berkeley. There is no proof of matter to this very day. And that's absolutely uncontroversial. So the problems with Berkeley is that Berkeley has a hypostasis, which I explained before, of minds like containers. He himself is doing a kind of magical magic trick. I mean, what are these implant in? I mean, it's like these are like little, embryonic sacs. And so he's got God is some mysterious container of ideas. They're in there. And where are these? We don't see these. So this is hypostasis. Hypostasis of our own selves. Okay? In this real world we can't see. Because we don't see these. We don't see God's mind. He had arguments for the existence of God, but they're not very convincing. So the other one is, our minds don't implant things. What does that even mean? He's basically appealing to God's magical power, which is like that's an easy one. I mean, like, if we can use magic, we can explain everything. We don't even need to be here. There's a magical tortoise, and it created the world, and see, I explained the world. And they go, where's the tortoise? Well, it's invisible. Part of its magic is that it's invisible. I did a great, So that's not what we mean by an account of something. And then finally, it's still a representationalism. It's still a representationalism. Your thoughts still are not direct experience of the real world, okay? The real drink is over here in God's mind. So we've really solved nothing. We're right back where we were. And so now, halfway. No, we're 10 minutes late. Okay, so now we come to David Hume. David Hume, what's he famous for? He's Scottish. He's famous for his ethics, and he's a good guy, real smart. Now, he was real impressed with Berkeley. Like I said, he was born when Berkeley's book came out, same year. And so he grew up with it. He thought, you know, Berkeley's got a point. I mean, they were all empiricists. They all believed we don't have any innate ideas. You learn everything from observation. Okay, you start with sense perception and then you figure things out. Okay, that'll make more sense later. So, so he takes Berkeley. He says, you know, Berkeley has a really good point, and Berkeley has a really good argument. And you know, and he takes this even further, and he goes, well, you know, Berkeley's right. I mean, if I can't see it, I don't have any reason to believe it, because at that time, seeing was believing. I mean, that's all you could. That was the only. That was the foundation for knowledge, sense perception. So if you don't have sense perception, you apparently made it up at some point. So he goes, well, not only does matter not exist, but these minds that I had up here, okay? I don't see them. No, I don't think there's any minds. No. And he says, you know, everybody's talking about themselves, the self, the soul. He goes, well, you know, when I look into my thoughts, I don't see a self, so I don't think there's a self. That's just like Buddhism. And he didn't get it from Buddhism. He got it on his own. He got it from Berkeley. He goes, bullshit. There's no self. All these are hypostases. Okay, everybody's been just fooling themselves. Well, basically he's saying, this is as stupid. You guys are as stupid as the savages, making up gods and sprites and stuff. That you're not thinking at all. So he tore everything apart. Now, he said there is no external world, or we can't talk about it. We don't know about it. Why should we even talk about it? And I have to say, he also said that causation is another thing that's invented in our head. Okay? There's no such thing. All there is correlation. So, you know, correlation's like this. Every time I take a bite of this apple, the phone rings. Okay? That's a correlation. Every time I take blah, blah, blah. But you could assume, but that's sort of what we mean by causation. You know, every time I knock on this table, I hear a knock. What's the difference? Well, we call that one causation, but we call the one with the apple correlation. But we can't say what's the difference. And he goes, "There's no difference at all. All we're talking, what are we talking about? He says all there is correlations in the world." I was talking to you about that the other day. So when I drop this rock, the correlation is that whenever time I drop this rock, it's going to fall. And he goes, "That's all we know. We don't know what caused it to fall." I go, "Cause? It's just nonsense." Okay. The problem with this is science is trying to talk about reality and talk about the real world, okay? And Hume has just left us with our own subjective internal experience. That's all we have. There's nothing objective at all because there's no external world or any of that stuff. It's just, and I don't know, we're talking about what we experienced. And the problem was that meant that science wasn't talking about anything. Hume's points were deeply concerned philosophers of his day for the notion there is no external world, or at least no evidence it existed, and no way to talk about it, seemed to undermine science as a rational field of endeavor. For science professes to deal with objective reality, a world of things as they really are outside us, independent of our subjective private experience. Yet Hume argued we had no rational basis for believing such a world existed. This was like relegating science to mere superstition. Okay, so that's where they were. And this is the age of reason. Okay. So, a great German read Hume's book, translated into German. Immanuel Kant, one of the smartest, most complicated minds that has ever lived. And I think that that's actually, well, it's an opinion, but it'd be hard to dispute. I won't go into it, but I have read what I need to for the perception part of his philosophy. It is a beast. Okay, but he had an incredible idea. He was very upset because he's the last philosopher of the Enlightenment. After that, everything went to chaos. We'll talk about that next week. And he tried to fix this skeptical problem. And in the process, he ironically, he brought back the external world, but even in a more mysterious way. Okay. And while he's genius, he unintentionally unleashed chaos that followed him and haunts us right into the 21st century. In Kant, we will see the first inklings of language like Baba's in infinite intelligence. And I will point that out when we get later in the talks. So, I'll show the quotes from Infinite Intelligence. It still remains okay, this is the introduction to the second edition of his magnum opus, The Critique of Pure Reason. It's called The Critique of Pure Reason because he says, we need to figure out what reason's capable, because Hume says we're only rational when we're talking about what we perceive. We've got to broaden that, but we don't want to broaden it so much that we're talking about elves and stuff. Okay, we need to find the critique reason and define what stands as reason. Now this is very important because that's the subject matter of these talks. The transition from reason to intuition. Now he's going to talk about intuition. He's going to use it in a way that's not going to be familiar to you unless you've studied Kant, which is very, very, very difficult. As a matter of fact, when I studied philosophy, they had a meeting and they said, we are giving these students an injustice, the graduate students, injustice because we're not teaching them Kant. They all agreed none of them was qualified to do so. It was too difficult. Three of them were from Harvard, one was from Stanford. So they sent Chris Hill, who's the guy I told you that says matter is a theoretical entity. They sent him to a conference, and he hired for 1 year, they hired a Cambridge Kant scholar. And that's where I learned Kant from. And he was there 1 year, Paul. And so Baba did that. Because that was my last semester, and Baba wanted me to hear it, okay? Now, Kant, in the introduction to the second edition of his book, he said, and this is so great because it sums up so much, it still remains a scandal in philosophy that the existence of things outside of us must be accepted merely on faith, and that if anyone thinks good to doubt their existence, we are unable to counter his doubts by any satisfactory proof. Okay. This is about 1781. Okay. Now, has Kant for a long time, he was just thinking like everybody else. But Hume, he said, woke him from his, what he called his dogmatic slumber. Woke him up. Whoa! He was real interested in what Hume said, because he really wanted science, very scientific thinker. Now, sometimes an invention provides inspiration for a grand new abstract idea. And you may have seen examples, but the glasses are one of them. I could name others, but glasses were key. And they were invented just about this time. Like his book came out in 1781, glasses, tinted glasses. Tinted glasses were first experimented with just less than 30 years earlier, okay? Now, notice something about tinted glasses. Now, the original tinted glasses were not sunglasses. They were they believed, the guy who invented them, he believed that they were corrective. If you use green or blue glass, he felt it would be corrective to certain vision impairments. Might even be true, I don't know. But, so Kant is seeing that. Something is changing, there's something that changes what you see. Okay, so you can use that as an analogy. Okay, it's not going to have hypostasis and invent magical glasses, but he gets an idea from that. Okay, so the idea from this, he gets the idea of active perception. Okay, perception has always been passive, so something out there has got to be causing it. Okay, and this is passive, like the woman who has the baby, like I told about Aristotle. But he gets an idea of active. Now, Kant is the most complicated philosopher that ever lived. but I'm going to explain it in 5 minutes. By just reading this to you. Kant differentiated phenomenal, now this is an idealism, but it's a different kind of idealism than Berkeley's, which he called transcendental idealism. Okay. He didn't want to be called an idealist, and they still wanted to make fun of Berkeley. They made lots of fun of Berkeley in Germany. So Kant differentiated phenomenal experience. That means what we perceive. You know, the tree inside the bubble. He differentiated phenomenal experience from the thing in itself, how things really are. Okay, so he still has this division. He presumed that our senses were indeed reporting to us something external to our minds, or independent of our minds, but not as it really is. Still sort of sounds like Plato or something like this, right? So Kant, getting rid of that. Okay, see, on Apple you don't have these funny things. Kant tried to save science by saying that our scientific statements were rational and true, so long as we were clear that we were referring to our mental representations of things as they are in reality. They're representations, like a movie, you know, and not as it is beyond the reaches of our experience. So he has a taboo basically on mysticism, which is a real feature of him. And actually, one of the reasons, because I won't go into that. He really hated woo-woo talk. Kant proposed that we do this by organizing, the way we see our representation is that we sort of like glasses, like tinted glasses, we organize our perceptions of the thing in itself in a comprehensible form, a form that we can understand and experience, that's clear to our perceptions, that it actually does not have. Now, okay, I'm going to draw. So here you are. This doesn't really represent your body, but it's better for understanding and represents your mind. He's looking out at the world. And out here is the mysterious thing in itself, which he also called the noumenon. Okay, he made up the word to go with phenomenon. So in here you have the phenomenon. Sorry, I laugh. I find it funny. Okay, so here we find the tree. Now, there's something out there. But you have these lenses, okay? And one of them is space. Things are not in space. Space is in you. He wasn't like a tabula rasa like these other guys. He wasn't like you're born an empty slate. He believed you're born with what he called intuitions. Space, he said, is a pure intuition. An intuition is something that you know and you don't know how you know it. And you definitely did not learn it. Okay? Now, when you look through this lens, which is an intuition, okay, mental intuition, that you're born with, that each person is born with, you see things spatially. It's like an adverb. Things are perceived in terms of space because you're doing that to it. Okay? That's this is an incredible idea. It's just incredible. It's really quite awesome. Now, he has other lenses, like time. Okay? Now, he believes that thoughts, you have to think one thought at a time. It's called discursive thinking. So discourse, just like you have to be able to see that's over there, here's over here, you can only do that through your space lens, okay? But when you have your thoughts, like 1 + 1 is 2, you gotta think about the one, then to think about the two, then think about, you have to do that discursively. He used the word discursively in a different sense than some dictionaries. He meant in an order, one thing at a time, okay? Discursive thinking. This, and therefore this, and therefore this. That you needed time. So you needed a time lens. So you're doing, then there were others that I won't get into, they're in the slides. You are producing this, yourself, out of something you cannot know. Okay. The thing in itself. Okay. Active intuitions. Now, thus our sensation that an object is over there and has spatial characteristics like size and shape is given to the object by our mind, not the other way around. And Kant said this is like the Copernican revolution. It's like Copernican revolution in thought. The Copernican revolution was the realization that the Earth went around the sun instead of the sun around the Earth. So similarly, well, anyway, it's a little hard to draw, but he said it's a total inversion. Okay, the cause is actually in you. It's kind of like the way the center was actually the sun. So you're the sun. All right. It's very important to notice that Kant introduced for the first time to Western philosophy the notion the mind playing an active role. I've said that before. So I give a little picture here, gives you the idea. Eye with a lens produces a way of seeing, okay? Which is essentially what a Kantian intuition is, a way of seeing. Now, by the way, the intuitions that were how you're producing, they had to be true because you're producing them. Anyway, that's strange, but they had to be true of your phenomenal experience because you actually were making them fact. Well, that's a little abstract. Now, by seeing objects as I said that. As for internal thinking, I said that. Now, notice that Kant's view, science can speak rationally of nature, so long as it is aware it is not speaking of the thing in itself, but only of our phenomenal representation of it. Our scientific statements refer to objects only to the extent that these are considered as phenomena and not representative things as they are. Kind of repeating myself, but for him, so you get it. Yet we share the same phenomena, world we experience, because each individual has his own set of these same intuitions that he's born with. Now, that's why science works. Because the scientists all are using the same intuitions, which are producing the things that they're discovering. They're mining the content of their own mind. Okay, repeating this for clarity, we can't know anything about the thing in itself, only our unique way of experiencing it. And hence, when we discuss science, we are actually discussing our phenomenal, meaning perceived, inner organizations, and not the real world as it is in itself. We can only speak knowingly of what we perceive, and for us, that is our world. So, but now, by this method, Kant felt he had rescued science from Hume. Science was within the scientist was within his epistemic rights, meaning he's rational, so long as he understands this. Okay. A brilliant but complex solution. Okay, got it? So everybody's going around with their own lenses. Got it, okay. Here's the problems with Kant, and then we're done, okay? Kant again hypostatizes. He's still hypostatizing, meaning making a thing, inventing a thing, the thing in itself. He's still doing it. It's an age-old habit. I've been talking about it since the second talk. Okay, the second thing is, each person for Kant is born with his own space and time unit glasses and other ones, but I didn't talk about. He has logical categories too. So you're still left with you're in a solipsism like in the Matrix. The whole world is in your head. Okay, you're not looking at it. So it's still counterintuitive. It's dry. Now, if we're all born with these, how did we get these? Well, we can't ask the question, according to Kant, because that would be a spiritual question. That would be very metaphysical. And that would be talking woo-woo talk. So we just can't ask. That was really nice. So everybody who asks is stupid. Shut up. We don't talk about God. Maybe there's God, but that's not scientific talk. That's for the woo-woo people. So, now he has another big problem. He has a dualism, okay? But he doesn't have any space and time. And he doesn't have any number, because a number, math, is in your head. That's not a real thing. You are numbering everything. You're organizing it into these numbers, okay? So there is no real numbers. So therefore, you can't have what's called numeric non-identity. You also can't have yourself over here and it over there, because that would be space, okay? So you can't separate anything, because all the modes of separation are in your own head. They're not real. So therefore, how could there be the thing in itself and my phenomenal perceptual picture? So he's doing a hypostasis, doing the same old thing, and he was criticized for it. And they said that he said the same thing as Berkeley. He was the Germans, the first Germans that read his book, and he was humiliated. And then he'd never read Berkeley, and then he ran out and he got his publisher to give him a copy of Berkeley's book, and they found it on the shelf when he was dead. It didn't look like he really read it. He commented what Berkeley thought in the second edition of his book, and they said it's so weirdly wrong that they think that he was like nervous to read it, because he was so big man, big ego. He deserved to have a big ego. He's a great genius, maybe the greatest genius the West ever produced. But he still has the thing in itself, and you still have this. He still has it. It's still there. He thought he had solved it. Oh, worse. This is impossible in Kant, because you can't have a division. There are no real divisions. So therefore, Kant's whole thing ends up being a self-contradiction. Now, he's the greatest mind in the age of reason. The smartest man in the smartest time. Kant says the intellect can know nothing about God, only our experience, only scientific science. The intellect can't fathom anything else. Next week, we will talk about the chaos that ensued because after Kant. We're now just where we want to be. It's fitting in perfectly. I can't believe it did that. No idea. This would take you 4 years in a university. And then you wouldn't get it. Okay, so now we will, next week we will talk about the chaos, and then the reaction to the chaos in the 20th century, which is going to be the opposite of the original dichotomy that I told you. I want to show that because these kind of need to be understood at the same time. Remember before I said Descartes had a mind-body? You know? He had two substances, and the other one we'll call it matter, okay? Okay, and that's the real tree, you know? And we had to get rid of one. Well, they tried getting rid of that one, and that didn't work. So next week, we're going to talk about how they tried to get rid of this one. And we're going to find out that didn't work either. Then we'll be exhausted. There's nowhere else to go except Baba. Baba is coming. He was born not long after Kant died. Oh, no, about the time Kant died, I believe. No, 1890. No, he's 100 years.
So how did these philosophers reconcile, like, this, they had to totally ignore all saints or people who actually had experiences of God, right? They had to ignore them.
That's a good point. You always bring up something really brilliant that I wanted to say, and it's really important that you brought that up. Berkeley is an exception, a big exception. Starting about the time of Descartes, after Descartes, you have a losing interest in God. Okay? This is a real pattern. As a matter of fact, the reason that Berkeley came up with his theory was not to explain perceptual problems. He was actually trying to come up with a way that God would be necessary. Because if the world was ideas, it had to be in a mind, because ideas could not exist anywhere but in a mind, so there had to be God. He was trying to fight what he saw, and he wrote about, what he saw a coming atheism. So by this time, they're all atheists. And Hume is an atheist, Kant is an atheist, he's an atheist. They're all atheists, and it's going to be nothing but atheists from here on out.
What time was Berkeley?
Berkeley he wrote in 1710. But now Kant is writing in about 1781. But Berkeley already saw this coming, and he wrote, it's the introduction to his book, or maybe one of his books. He called them the free thinkers. And we have that word today. It means atheist, okay? And they were using the same stupid arguments that they used today. Well, then why is there evil? You know, the kind of stuff. So he was very concerned about that. He saw it coming. He was right. He might have been a saint. I don't know, a lower saint or something. But that's why he's my favorite. Do you see? That's why he's my favorite. Because he would really loved God. And there's so many stories of his character. They said it was an impeccable character. Nobody could find a flaw in him. They would come to seek him out at Cape Cod, wherever that was, just to talk with him because of his fame as a human being and an intellectual. So we will cover the 20th century next week, the whole thing. It's going to be amazing. I can do it because we have a frame. It's materialism, okay? We just talked about idealism. I think now you can understand these terms. That was idealism. Next week it's materialism, and that's the 20th century. It's just the 20th century. You know when materialism became a thing? 1901. It's like, boom. It was like, psh. And Baba came in the materialistic age. And we will then look back after that, and we will look back on this history, and we'll talk about what's missing that I believe that Baba has come to give. And Baba was coming, all the while this is going on. He's coming. He wrote his book anyway, 1955, God Speaks, perfect, just perfect. He's not coming when there's a lot more philosophy to do. Philosophy basically comes to an end in the West in 1955. There really isn't anything new. That's absolutely true. The last person was Wittgenstein. His book came out like practically the same year after he was dead. There's really nothing left. Everything is repeat. It's over. Okay. Thank you, Jai Baba. Thank you.